Great. Well, Mark 9, starting at chapter 9. Let's see. Christy, do you want to start?
Sure. Coming of Elijah. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead could mean. Then they asked him, "Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" He said to them, "Elijah is indeed coming first, to restore all things. How then is it written about the Son of Man, that he is to go through many sufferings and be treated with contempt? But I tell you that Elijah has come, and they did to him whatever they pleased, as it is written about him." When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and some scribes arguing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe, and they ran forward to greet him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak, and whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." He answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. When the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out, "I believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him, and never enter him again." After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he was able to stand. When he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" He said to them, "This kind can come out only through prayer." Interesting. Should I go a little farther?
Sure.
Okay. Jesus again foretells his death and resurrection. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him, "Who is the greatest?" Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. So this is the second time they've been doing this? I love it.
Yeah, they didn't get it the first.
No.
He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me."
Okay.
So he repeats the exact same thing.
Maybe
Almost.
we're just off because we read this last week in the sermon, so maybe it was the same.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, at the end of 8, he says, "Take up your cross and follow me. Those who would, lose their life will find it." So it's similar, but they're still not understanding the...
But it wasn't that they were arguing.
They weren't arguing that
About that
time.
time. Yeah, okay.
They just didn't know about the
I think what you got.
cross piece. Yeah, so what jumps out at you in the passage we read?
So this healing of the boy seems much more dramatic. Like this spirit was harder to cast out, or it was more destructive to the boy, and it was trying to kill him, and like, why was it so much more serious?
Yeah.
Well, it would make sense that some demons would be stronger than other demons, and some illnesses are stronger than other illnesses, and
And why is prayer
Yeah.
any more important than a certain other
Right.
way. I
Right.
don't know. And what is the definition of prayer?
This kind can come out only through prayer.
I really don't know.
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, and Jesus seems disappointed that they don't know and can't
Yeah.
do this.
And they note that other ancient authorities also add fasting in the footnote here. Footnotes!
Footnotes.
I think that's what we're looking for. But otherwise, he could be just giving an explanation other than the fact that yes, he does have more authority than they do. After all, the demons don't cower. Don't. At least not that we've heard. Don't typically cower in the face of the disciples either. But they see Jesus and they're immediately begging that
Right.
he not destroy them and cast them into the pigs instead.
Do you think that he has more authority, or does he have more faith? That the demons see what amount of faith that he has, because Jesus tells them right out, if you have enough faith, you can do this.
Yeah,
You
that's
know-
a very good point.
So I don't know.
Well, it could be two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
That, the authority that Jesus has is partially just from his own deep knowledge that wasn't taught to him, that he found within himself of who God is and what God can do.
Okay.
And so when the scribes come, they speak from book knowledge. Oh, this is what the scriptures say, and this is what, this rabbi says about it. Jesus is like, well, I know from my own sense of the living God this, and it just feels so much more maybe three-dimensional and
Yep.
full. And so I think that, yeah, faith and authority, all of that is interwoven. And I wonder, too, if Jesus understands that, okay, I'm going to have two conflicting ideas. One is that the more capacity you have within yourself to be in that faith and relationship with God and in kind of your own authority, the more you can contain that and like help heal people and do the exorcisms and stuff like that. And so maybe Jesus is disappointed that the disciples aren't there yet, that they're not able to contain that level. Or it's the Yoda thing where when Luke goes to see Yoda and he's lifting little pebbles, but then when he has to lift the big thing, he says, I can't do it, it's too big. And Yoda's like, it's all just in your mind. If you can lift a pebble, you can lift a giant ship out of the mud. It's all in your mind. And I wonder if Jesus was like, if you can heal one person, you can heal this person. It's in your mind that this is too strong for you. And I know those are conflicting things. And I honestly am just curious about the truth of both of them.
Could be.
That maybe the more faith you have, the more you realize how limited you were in your head before. There you go. That's maybe how the two work together. And so the more you realize it is just in my head, the more capacity you have to let God do things through you. And maybe Jesus would say, it's not even me. It's God casting this out. It's God healing. It's God doing these things. I'm just...
Well, I mean, I would think that sounds like that makes a lot of sense to me. But Jesus has a personal relationship, being more so than anybody else that we know of, with God being however you want to see it, as prophet or son of God. He has a relationship. Well, I guess what he's trying to say is the stronger your relationship is, the easier those things would be, I would think.
Yeah, that could be. And it has nothing to do with how great you are, right? The transition.
Yeah.
So you being able to heal or exercise actually doesn't say that you're great. It says how God is great, and that you maybe have emptied yourself out enough that God can be, like, you're a clean channel through which that can work, and that it's very possible our ego and desire to be great. I'm reading it's called An Autobiography of a Yogi, and it's this thick autobiography of the very first guy who brought yoga to the United States. And when he's young and living in India, he's visiting all the gurus. And these people can do amazing things. And one of the people he sat with, someone came up to the guru and said, "Heal me. I have this affliction." And he says, "I can't heal you." And he says, "No, but you can ask for the one who heals." And he goes, "Oh, you're right. You're right. I can petition on your behalf because it's not me that's doing the healing." And sure enough, within 7 days, the man was healed, praying this certain prayer. But so it was a very interesting story where he's like, "I can't heal anyone. What are you talking about?" It's interesting.
When you talk about emptying yourself out, I believe the person has less power or empties themselves the most, as you said, is the person that will come to have the ability to heal more or do more. And he says it again and again and again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta be like a child. You gotta do this. You gotta do all this. You know, he continuously says it to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should I go on?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. We'll finish 9, I guess. Okay. Another exorcist. John said to him, "Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him, because he was not following us." But Jesus said, "Do not stop him, for no one who does a deed of power in my name will be able soon afterward to speak evil of me. Whoever is not against us is for us. For truly I tell you, whoever gives you a cup of water to drink, because you bear the name of Christ, will by no means lose the reward." Temptations to sin. "If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were hung around your neck and you were thrown into the sea. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than to have 2 hands and go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life lame than to have 2 feet and to be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into hell, where their worm never dies and the fire is never quenched. For everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its saltiness, how can you season it? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another." So, you've said, Pastor, that, hell to them was not this place that we think of, but it was right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is he really referring to here?
Yeah, the actual word in Greek is Gehenna, which was the garbage
So it's that burning fire.
The burning
of
fire.
Yuck. Okay.
outside of Jerusalem. Yeah,
Oh.
a garbage pit. And there were probably people who were living around it, like the poorest of the poor. So it's a metaphor for like dejection, exclusion from community, and just like suffering. The question is always, how literal do you think Jesus was being, and how much was he using this, as he does in other cases, as a way to get people's attention? Because he's not actually saying, cut your hand off.
Right.
he's not, like, some poor people have actually tried to take this literally. This is a metaphor, so then why would the hell, an unquenchable fire, not also be a metaphor for suffering? Another thing we don't often think about is how, if we trace, there's some really good books written on this, if we trace the evolution of the concept of hell, it took a couple hundred years, if not more, for it to develop into what we think of, and in fact, it wasn't solidified into the form we think of until Dante's Inferno. So when people are really trying to defend that hell is exactly the way we in 2024 think of it with the Bible, they're just ignorantly losing that whole trajectory of, I mean, there was even, I think, a Greek, is it a Greek? Not a Greek. There is some goddess named Hel that later added to all of this and the name hell in the first place, because hell is not a Greek word.
Not Hades, another one actually called hell.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is Hades wasn't even a bad place. Hades was just the place where everybody went to. Jesus is speaking of a certain belief that they had of, if everybody goes to Hades, then when the Son of Man comes again and everybody's brought forward, then there's like a separating of like sheep and goats and stuff like that. So there was sort of a sense of judgment, right? But we don't fully know how much that was just current Jewish thought and how much Jesus was using that to try to get people's attention. How literal that is, like, it's a interesting conversation.
I come to these Bible studies to learn more, and I leave here
With more questions.
with more questions.
But that's actually good.
It is a
'cause
good
it's-
thing, but which is a good thing.
So just the context of this is really important, because unfortunately hell has been used to scare people in general, often into compliance of very rigid behaviors, and that is problematic. Jesus is saying, if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones, he's speaking about power and abuse of power. Therefore, the entire conversation is predicated upon those who have power of any capacity and are there to harm. And when I read this, I honestly think about priests and youth pastors who have abused kids or cheated people out of their money. You know, like the use and abuse of your power to cause harm, religiously, spiritually, in any way, shape, or form. If that is the context of who Jesus is talking to, it fits in line with every time Jesus is speaking harshly, he's usually speaking to those who have power and really trying to scare them into being responsible with their power, just like we're going to see with the rich man, where he sees an imbalance and an almost cluelessness about their responsibility to others. That's what I'm thinking of right now. And actually, the next couple of things seem to talk about the responsibility of those who have power over those who don't. The teaching about divorce is very much about the imbalance of rights and power.
Okay, I'll read the next two sections. And then the next one is the one we heard today, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Divorce. He left that place and went to the region of Judea and beyond the Jordan. And crowds again gathered around him, and as was his custom, he again taught them. Some Pharisees came, and to test him they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Then in the house the disciples asked him again about this matter. He said to them, Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. Little children. People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them. And the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it. And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them.
Well, there's nothing hard about that first one.
So, as I like to say, if you're using the Bible to take people who are hurting and hurt them more, you're using it wrong.
Mhm.
If you're using the Bible to prop up structures of power, you're using it wrong. So Jesus clearly was not trying to shame people in a hard situation. So
Divorce is bad. You need to stay
Right.
married no matter what.
exactly. Even if your
Being
spouse
abused.
is being abusive to you, because clearly God loves marriage more than your safety. I have very strong opinions about this. I believe Jesus is always on the side of what is good for our soul, what is thriving. He's always looking out for the one who would be harmed. Just like how they wanted to throw stones at the woman. In this culture, women had no right to divorce a man.
Yeah.
But the man could divorce the wife at the drop of a hat. And because the woman had no rights and no money and nothing, a man divorcing her put her in a very awkward situation where she might be forced to go live with her son or her parents or become a beggar or a prostitute. So it is unjust to divorce your wife callously or without thought. So he's speaking to the men here,
Yeah.
the ones in power. He's saying that because we know that life is life and people are people, it's allowed for you to divorce, but don't abuse that privilege just because it's written in the law. And so then he talks about, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. That would have gotten their attention. They would have been like, oh, I thought I could do whatever I wanted. So in this, when pastors have used this to shame divorce completely, period, they're using it wrong. They're using it wrong. God understands that we make vows for various reasons, and we are not always entering into marriage with full knowledge and capacity and maturity and everything like that. And so divorce may happen for sometimes good reasons. To somehow think that God puts so many eggs in our human ability to make perfect vows to each other is, why would that be the one thing that we are unable to get out of? So. And in the next section, again, children were not seen as having much value. So that again would have made them confused. Whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like they are a little child, with the mentality of a little child, with the would have had them pause and wonder what that meant.
It's also interesting in the section with the blessings or the with the children and keep the disciples wanting to keep the children at bay, and also earlier when the disciples were trying to stop the person who was healing in Jesus' name, they were trying to I mean, there's a little bit of that trying to control the power again, and Jesus is trying to quell that without rebuking them too harshly, but tempering that tendency to say, this isn't about the disciples, it's about anyone who's with us, I mean, who is not against us is with us. As opposed to that other mentality of anyone who's not for us is against us, that we
Right.
hear too much about. And I mean, there are going to be those who are going to be in the neutral ground, but he prefers the mentality of if they're not actually against me, it's like those who you don't have any reasons to doubt is more a potential friend than a potential enemy.
Yeah, there's a false sense of boundaries and our work and our authority and our reputation. And well, you're going to see this at the end of 10 where Bartimaeus is calling out, heal me, and they're trying to tell him to be quiet. There's multiple stories, you just reminded me, in a row where people try to keep back from Jesus the people they think are unworthy. And yet Jesus continually shows them that all people are worthy. And then, well, this guy, we got to form teams, right? Us and them. And Jesus is like, oh my gosh. So that sense of just the divisions we put up, it's so ingrained in us to do that. And I wonder about how that manifests with us in terms of who we think is worth our time and what's worth our time and energy, and as a church and as individuals and as a nation.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, like with the children
Yeah.
passage. And
Yeah.
I think you talked about it last week in your sermon, where to them, at that time, the children had no value.
Mm-hmm.
Who do we now in our age place no value on? And I've been trying to think, like, I think you said a drag queen in your in your Lenten devotion.
That was
a good
great
example. Because my mind wants to go to, like, maybe a criminal, maybe a homeless person, and all of that maybe would apply. But then Olaf and I were talking about it, and we realized, like, for us, it's someone like Trump.
Oh.
So it's someone on that other extreme, where I'm sorry, but I don't want to invite Trump. I don't want someone like Trump. But he gets the grace of God just like everybody else.
I know. I've been that thing stuck right here so hard
Yeah.
in me.
Because,
It
like,
is.
yeah, my bleeding heart, I always have compassion and want to reach out to those little ones. But it's the people in power that I don't have it for, and I should have it for them too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially those that, I mean, it's not those, the power is how they use it, and
Yep.
he's a prime example of, I mean, the vitriol coming from him,
Yes.
and his
Right.
reactions to anyone who
Yes.
who disagrees with him, and
Yes.
it's just,
But yet Jesus would probably say, if he were here, let Trump come to me.
Right, but he would also talk to him like he
He
did
would.
the Pharisees.
He would.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I agree.
Okay,
I agree.
Jesus encounters each person, I think, and tells them what they need to hear,
Oh,
and it's up to them
Oh my God.
to decide if they're going to respond or not. And I
Yeah.
think we sometimes confuse God's unbelievable capacity to love us, no matter who we are, with, it's okay, keep doing what you're doing. We completely confuse that. We sometimes think that, you hear this in conservative Christianity, that if you somehow talk about the grace of God, then people are going to abuse it, and they're going to keep doing what they're doing. And as I've said before, that's not your choice. It's not your decision. So in the IFS thing, where you find the parts of yourself and you go and meet them, the hardest thing is to find the parts of yourself that you don't wish were a part of you. The shameful, angry parts, or the parts of you that come out and you're like, what the heck was that? When we do find capacity to greet those with compassion and understand them and give them love, the irony is when we see those modeled in other people, we have more compassion for them as well. So what I'm saying is that goes endlessly. That Jesus would be able to see a murderer and every capacity of evil person, and be curious and compassionate towards them and yet want their healing.
Yeah.
Because you don't greet the part within you and you go, hey, keep doing what you're doing. Everything's fine. It's fine that you blow up at your kids. It's fine that you, right? That's fine. No, love and compassion doesn't mean that what's happening is fine. It means you're creating space where they can maybe unburden themselves and go back to whom they truly could be. And so someone like Trump, if he had any space within himself, which it's not me to judge whether he does or doesn't.
Yeah.
If he had
But I
any
do.
space with himself to truly sit with that love and forgiveness of God so that he could look at the hurting parts within himself and address them with love and compassion, he would, underneath all of that, there is a child of God's
Yep.
self that would have the capacity to do that.
Right.
But
And
And that's the part that I struggle with. Like, I don't want to give him any grace.
yeah,
of course.
yeah.
We don't.
But-
But, and I've been struggling with that again, as I said too. And so I go, what was all the compounds that came together to make this person? You know, at a young age, he found out if he did this kind of more powerful, he got this. And it kept growing and kept growing. And then he had this charisma that some people are attracted to or something. And so he had his posse and it's always worked for him. And so he actually he's not a self-made man. All these ingredients has come together to make him who he is.
Oh, yeah.
And who is self-made.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He couldn't be anybody but who he is from everything that's done.
Yeah.
And the lesson is for us to learn. And if he wants to learn the lesson, it's a lesson for him to learn. But it's a lesson for us to study and think about what makes people who they are.
And in your love and compassion for someone, you can put up the appropriate boundaries. Again,
Oh,
just
yeah.
because you feel compassion towards someone does not mean you allow them to hurt themselves or others.
Right.
You bind those that are harming and you loose those that need loosing. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, they're looking at him as a child of God in no way says that he doesn't need consequences
Yep.
or
I agree.
less power or anything to control the damage he may do. Yeah.
Yeah, just like any person that is born, some people are just their DNA or whatever their brain set is destructive, and you might see it as a child hurting animals or something like this or something like that. And that, okay, oh God, you want to treat that person as good as you can, but you got to keep the person away from areas where it can hurt people. And in the most compassionate sighting humanly possible. And us, whoever do-gooders are fail to realize to make it compassionate for those people.
Yeah.
That could be the real sin in the whole thing, is the people that fail to make it compassionate for those people.
Yeah. Well, because it goes too far. Like Jeffrey Dahmer was one of those people. If someone had recognized and gotten him the help he needed as a child, maybe he could have been healed.
Right.
But that doesn't happen. It didn't happen for Trump. And
And if
that
some
just
people
gets
can't
worse.
be healed, they still deserve all the compassion.
Yeah.
And that, which you
But the
would say-
binding, like-
Yep.
Finding.
And so, and in that whole thing, is there X amount of people on this side of the scale and X amount of people on this scale? It's a yin yang. God says we got to have balance. We got to have yin yang. It's and so is their part any worse than the good people's? I struggle so much. I'm lost.
I think we would be, our whole society would be wiser and more effective if we looked at each person as a full human being deserving compassion that is not divided between good people and bad people,
Okay.
but between various levels of hurt
Yeah.
and healing.
Yeah.
So there are some people who I would give leadership to gladly because they have done so much healing work on themselves. They're humble, they're compassionate, they're courageous. And there are those who I would not give leadership power to because they do not have those qualities and they haven't addressed any hurt that's within them. And to those people that need help, we give adequate help.
Yes.
So prisons, it'd be amazing if prisons were genuine rehabilitation centers that were safe, where people were having meditation and meals and so on and so forth and personal therapy, and were released back with all of the positive opportunities they possibly could be and truly seen as rehabilitated rather than put away, punished, where it's just like, oh, let the cockroaches fight with each other. Because they're seen as bad people. And that's the way our society views criminals is, well, you did something bad, therefore you must be bad. And it's just, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. Given a different circumstance in my life, if I'd had a different family, if I'd had different things come my way, what would I be capable of to protect myself and others? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in another life, in another day, I could be in a women's prison right now.
Yeah. If you grew up with drug addict parents and poverty, that's all you knew, that's all you had access to. You couldn't get an education.
The core of myself
Yep.
is the same, but the life would have been different. And if we honored the fact that had these people been given something different, that they could be, and they still could be, that it is actually possible for people to change. And that's the other thing that's a mature understanding, is that people do change given the right circumstances. And we just have a very immature, accusatory, black and white view of the world. And then, too, when the prisons are shaped, take that back, and start looking at the way we treat people all the way back to birth. And what other systems do we create that, that would ever put someone in prison in the first place? Take it back, to the point where prisons don't exist anymore. There's just various levels of help and rehabilitation. That's the future that I want.
Plus the realization that we all have good and bad in us.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at a lot of these crimes that people get locked away for, too, they're more often than not crimes of desperation.
Yeah.
Where they're people who are trying to get money for food, or they get addicted to drugs and the stereotype of stealing money for drugs. I mean, that is still a crime of desperation, and the desperation comes out of whatever ultimately comes from whatever desperation drove them to the drugs in the first place. People don't typically fall into drugs just because. It's a trap. First one's free.
Yeah, they almost,
I like that.
they have a lot of documentation to show that in communities, when a company moves into a community, for example, and there's job opportunities, crime plummets. And people's life increases. And then say like 50 years, the company shuts down and leaves. Guess what? Crime increases, things become less safe not because people suddenly were bad, but because now there's a different level of desperation, and survival is much more on the forefront of people's minds instead of thriving. And so if we could find a way to take care of everybody's basic needs, we could focus on the thriving and the healing and the,
So maybe we're talking about this as all things to strive for. It's probably, I don't know if we can have heaven on earth, but the thing is in the striving towards, maybe.
Well, so imagine if we all get sick of war and violence.
Yep.
And we decide that we're going to teach in schools and in churches and community centers how to have caring conversations and how to do peacemaking. It's part of the curriculum. We teach it. And we have social workers and therapists who respond to domestic violence. And so instead of police officers, we just invest all our military money, we invest it in helping people with their mental and physical well-being. And so suddenly, war is not really an option. Poverty and homelessness aren't really things that happen. That would feel like heaven on earth. If the only problems we were dealing with were just interpersonal squabbles and, marriage counseling, good God, I want that world. I'm happy. Like that may not be heaven, but it would be great. And I think it's possible. I think that we are so stuck in this idea that these are our only options. War, violence, shame, condemnation, judging, black, white, good, bad. We've been in that mentality for so long as a humanity that we think that's our only option. And I really think Jesus was showing another way. I think he was trying to ignite our imagination into a reality that God could introduce, not so that everything's perfect, because we're still going to make mistakes. People are still going to, you're still going to break your first high school boyfriend's heart because you did something stupid. Like, stuff's going to happen. That's part of us learning and growing and maturing. But there's a whole level of suffering that's completely unnecessary. That when we are able to grow in our capacity for self-forgiveness and forgiveness and compassion, and to put our money where our mouth is and to build better, more just systems. And we actually see in communities and places, there's like documented cases where major positive shifts have happened when a nonprofit stepped in, when a this stepped in. So change is possible. It's just we don't always believe we can do it on a global scale, and we don't have the leaders that are mature enough
That's the big
to
one.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole adage of absolute power corrupts absolutely, and
Yeah.
well, they don't. We try not to give our leaders absolute power. Boy, they sure, over the courses of the years in America, they sure have whittled more power out for themselves than what was originally in place.
Well, and unfortunately right now, the people who seek power are kind of immature. Like they're doing it for egotistical reasons often, not always. Some of the people who I think should be running countries and churches and other places like that and corporations are probably people who don't want the job.
Exactly.
I think Abraham Lincoln hit on that one.
That's
himself,
true.
talking about
It was.
for the man who doesn't want to be the president is the most qualified to be the president.
Yeah. There was a last thing I'll say because we're getting close to time here, but I think this fits. There's a power paradigm. If you imagine a wheel, and there's 6 levels of power, and the first level is powerlessness. Just you don't have any power at all. You feel awful. The second one is power by association. Well, I'm get my power because I hang out with these people. You name drop and power. The third one is you feel a sense of power, but it's very self-oriented. It's power for it to shine a spotlight on yourself. You get to the 4th stage of power, and it starts to be a little bit more of a round table where you see your power as empowering and collaborating and bringing people together. And by the 5th and the 6th, you're starting to become more of the hermit in the woods. Your power is so internalized that you don't need any external validation, and you just sort of, you don't seek any positions of power whatsoever. Most people in positions of power are 2 and 3. And because by the time you start to hit 4, 5, and 6, you're not seeking it anymore. You're not running unless someone really bugs you to do it. To me, that's a beautiful, powerful example. I think Jesus was a 6 who just had a massive passion, but by definition, he wouldn't have sought power. And by definition, if he had a mature sense of power, he would have been empowering others. He would have wanted to spread and share power and to let people know that they had power. So there are people like that who are famous in that, but it's not very often.
I think that's exactly what he was trying to do to his disciples.
Exactly.
And the church and everything else. He wanted to do that. He knew he was gone.
Yeah.
He knew he wasn't going to have the power.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. He had to pass it on.
Yep. Don't rely on me to do it.
No.
You guys got to figure this out yourself. All right.
All right.
Wow.
Good.